Welcome to the Deep Dive. This is where we take a whole stack of information, articles, research, notes, and really try to pull out the most important nuggets for you. Today, we're doing something pretty interesting, diving into the pulse of conservative thought. We're looking at discussions from an online Reddit community, specifically for conservatives, plus some related articles.
Yeah, it's a really unique way to get a handle on current debates, and also the broader concerns that shape a big part of the American political scene. Our goal here is to unpack some key political and legal discussions. We'll focus mainly on a pretty high-profile judicial nomination, but we also found some surprisingly relatable topics that show you the range of everyday stuff people are thinking about, too.
Okay, yeah, let's get into it. So the main thread, as you said, is this nomination of Emil Bove. He's up for the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Third Circuit. And this nomination, it's definitely caused a stir, lots of discussion, lots of division. It gives us a window, really, into broader conservative thinking on, courts, power, politics.
Absolutely. Emil Bove, he's currently a Justice Department official, but his background, it's pretty extensive, and that's part of why he's getting so much attention. He was a federal prosecutor for almost 10 years, Southern District in New York. He was even co-chief of the National Security and International Narcotics Unit there.
Wow.
Yeah, and during that time, he actually helped lead the indictment against Nicolas Maduro, the Venezuelan president, on drug charges. So, that's a serious record.
No kidding. So on paper, he's got these really impressive legal credentials. We saw he graduated Georgetown Law, 4.0 GPA,
Right.
held these prestigious clerkships. You mentioned judges Richard Sullivan and Richard Wesley, worked at what they call a premier international law firm. But okay, here's where it gets, really interesting and where a lot of the debate kicks off. After he left the DOJ, he went into private practice. And specifically, he started defending Donald Trump against what his supporters call Democrat lawfare. What exactly are they getting at with that term?
Right. So for them, Democrat lawfare, it's not just, normal legal fights. They see it as legal actions that are politically motivated, basically designed to use the justice system as a weapon against opponents, especially Trump. So Bove stepping into that, defending Trump, his allies see that as a really courageous and principled stand.
Okay, that clarifies the perspective. And his supporters, people like Representative Jim Jordan, they definitely lean on his sterling resume. They argue he's exactly the kind of person we need on the federal bench right now, praising his defense of the Constitution and the rule of law.
Exactly. And they think his background, being both a prosecutor and a defense lawyer, makes him fair-minded and even-handed. That's seen as crucial for a judge. James Burnham, one supporter, he points out that Bove faced all this withering criticism in the press. And Burnham says that shows he's battle-tested, has the fortitude required to be a strong and independent judge. It's this recurring idea, this conservative desire for judges who aren't just smart legally, but also tough enough to resist political pressure and stick to a certain view of the Constitution, often, textualist or originalist.
Yeah.
And you have figures like Pam Bondi and Todd Blanche, the Attorney General and Deputy Attorney General, publicly calling him a brilliant legal mind and a courageous lawyer.
But on the flip side, there's some really intense criticism. And interestingly, some of it comes from within conservative legal circles, too. People like Ed Whelan raising concerns it's a blatant attempt to install a loyalist. Jonah Goldberg suggesting Trump just wants servile loyalty.
So what's the core disagreement there inside the conservative movement? Is it about his qualifications or is it something else? It seemed to be more about this perceived shift, like what's the main thing you look for in a judge? Traditionally, conservative legal types prioritized really strict adherence to the Constitution, judicial restraint, that sort of thing. But with Bove, the critics, even some conservatives, worry that the number one qualification has become personal loyalty to Trump. And they see that as, undermining the whole idea of an independent judiciary, the idea that judges should just apply the law no matter who appointed them.
Right. That's a really important distinction. Now, let's talk about a major point of friction. His actions as Principal Associate Deputy Attorney General, specifically ordering the dismissal of bribery charges against NYC Mayor Eric Adams. We saw prosecutors like Danielle Sassoon actually resigned over this. She alleged a quid pro quo involving Adams cooperating on immigration. Bove denies that strongly, but what's his side, or his supporter side, of why those charges were dropped?
Well, Bove's defense, and you hear this echoed by supporters like Mike Davis, is that the Adams case itself was politically motivated. And that pushing forward with it would have basically hampered the mayor's ability to govern. They argue that, public policy negotiations aren't corrupt quid pro quos. And crucially, they say, prosecutors don't run their own kingdoms. The executive power belongs to the president. That right there, that's a pretty clear example of the unitary executive theory in practice.
Okay, and that brings us to another really serious controversy. These allegations from Erez Ruveni, a former DOJ immigration lawyer, he filed a whistleblower complaint, claimed Bove told government lawyers to just ignore federal court orders about deportation flights, reportedly used some extremely strong language, basically telling them to disregard the courts, including a pretty shocking expletive directed at the court. What's Bove's response to that?
Yeah, that's a heavy accusation. Under oath, Bove forcefully denied it all, called the claims wildly inaccurate. He stated the department always meant to follow court orders. And again, you have Attorney General Bondi and Deputy AG Blanche defending him, basically dismissing Ruveni as a disgruntled former employee.
Yeah.
They call it false claims in a politically timed smear campaign, just meant to derail Bove's confirmation. So they frame it as politics, not substance.
It's really fascinating how these specific arguments around Bove connect back to these core conservative ideas about power in the courts. You mentioned the unitary executive theory. Can you maybe break that down a bit more for us?
Sure. Basically, the unitary executive theory means the president holds all the executive power. That's the idea. It implies that everyone working in the executive branch works for the president and has to follow his directions. So Bove's supporters, they praise his fidelity to our constitutional structure. They believe the president has the right, indeed the obligation, to control the executive branch. And they push back against what they see as insubordination from this unelected bureaucracy. Bove himself actually framed the criticism against him that way. He said it's fundamentally a dispute about the challenges posed by the unelected bureaucracy to the unitary executive. It's all about accountability to the elected president.
That's a very clear stance, and it flows right into their views on judicial activism, doesn't it? We see this strong conservative worry about an activist federal judiciary just trying to block President Trump's agenda. Judges substituting their policy preferences for those of the elected branches.
Precisely. They view that as judges stepping way outside their lane, getting into making policy, instead of just interpreting the law. And this concern often gets, amplified when judges issue those really broad nationwide injunctions, stopping a policy everywhere. Even Justice Alana Kagan, back in 2022, pointed this out. She said, basically, it can't be right that one district court can stop a nationwide policy in its tracks and leave it stopped for years.
Right. And some conservatives definitely cheered the recent Supreme Court ruling that limited those injunctions. They see it as a win. They want judges who will faithfully apply the law, not, push their own policy goals. It really hammers home that desire for judicial restraint. Now, shifting gears slightly, but still related to executive power, immigration, the sources point to Trump's long-standing promise on that. Stopping illegal immigration, going full throttle on it. What kind of actions are mentioned?
Well, things like deploying active duty troops, 1,500 of them, plus military aircraft, specifically for deportation flights, and plans for even more Marines. It shows a very determined, you could say, assertive approach to border security and enforcing immigration laws.
Yeah.
It's a core promise he made.
And the DOJ, under Trump, it was told to prosecute local officials who get in the way of ICE or Border Patrol operations. We saw Emil Bove's memos, for instance. He identified threats like cartels and other transnational criminal organizations, violent crime by illegal aliens, and the fentanyl crisis. And he specifically cited the Supremacy Clause, saying it requires state and local actors to comply with the executive branch's immigration enforcement activities. That emphasis on federal power over local resistance, it's a constant theme.
Yeah, it is. And, just one other interesting side note on immigration we saw. Some conservative commentators were actually surprised by economists questioning Canada's immigration system. There was analysis suggesting Canada isn't really set up to boost GDP per capita through more immigration, mainly because of weak investment and issues with immigrant selection trade-offs. It just shows maybe a willingness to look at the economic numbers on immigration, even if it bumps up against prior beliefs.
The source material also gives us this really vivid sense of political polarization and infighting, too, even within the conservative movement itself. It seems like the internal stuff is just as complicated as the fights with the other side.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
A sentiment that came through was this idea that politics today mainly revolves around the pleasure of making the other side upset, driven by resentment. The sources laid it out pretty starkly. Liberals might see conservatives as hateful racists, while conservatives often view liberals as smug and sophomoric. It really paints a picture of this deep divide, often based on caricatures.
And on the Republican side, there's this strong push against rhinos, right? Republicans in name only. It seems like there's much reservations about a politician being too conservative. But like you said, the sources also show plenty of infighting within the GOP. It's definitely not just one unified bloc.
Yeah, and a prime example was Trump's recent criticism of the Federalist Society and Leonard Leo. He accused them of bad advice, said they were under the thumb of a real sleazebag after a court ruling on his tariffs didn't go his way. It suggests this demand for, well, servile loyalty, as Goldberg put it, even from judges and respected conservative legal groups, and that could potentially cause a fracturing within the conservative legal movement. It raises a big question. Can a group focused on legal philosophy stay independent when faced with demands for pure political loyalty?
That's a huge tension point. And this focus on loyalty or maybe concern about different ideological factions, it plays out locally too. We saw discussion around the recent NYC mayoral primary, the win by Zohran Mamdani, a Democratic socialist. His support for things like a $30 minimum wage and government-owned grocery stores with mandatory price caps, well, that's viewed with some real apprehension in the conservative comments we saw.
Right. Commentators worry those policies could basically turn the service industry into the automated industry. They argue the mandates might just lead to job losses as businesses automate to cut costs. They see it as this massive disconnect between what the affluent liberal class wants for the poor and the poor who have to live with the consequences. It's critique saying, essentially, these policies sound good, maybe, but could actually hurt the people they're supposed to help.
Now, this online conservative community, it also seems to be grappling with some, frankly, really disturbing issues that came up. One really stark example was about a University of Florida law student. Their paper argued that we the people only meant white people and that the 14th and 15th Amendments are illegitimate. And this paper was actually awarded by a Trump judge. Adding another layer, this same student had apparently previously called for the extermination of Jews. I mean, that's just profoundly troubling stuff.
It really is. And it sparked a big debate in the community. Should a law school even award a paper like that? Some argued the legal reasoning itself was just terrible, woefully inept, indefensible from a legal standpoint, basically saying it failed academically, regardless of the awful content. But others brought up the principle of viewpoint-neutral grading, especially in public schools, saying you have to grade the argument, even if it's reheating ideas from, say, the Dred Scott case. Even despite the students' hateful background statements, it really forces a tough conversation about where academic freedom ends and promoting hate speech begins.
Wow. Okay, so amidst all of that, the high-stakes politics, the legal battles, the really heavy ideological debates, the source material from this online community also gave us these surprisingly normal, down-to-earth moments. It shows the everyday lives and concerns that exist alongside these huge debates. It's a good reminder that political identity isn't everything.
That's so true. Like, there were practical homeowner tips. Someone learned the hard way about cleaning out their AC condensation line because their Nest thermostat stopped working.
Yeah.
A clogged pipe. It just speaks to that shared, practical, problem-solving mindset you often find valued in these circles.
Yeah, or the gardening updates. People from different states sharing their successes, good harvests of broccoli, peas, peppers, strawberries, cherries, black raspberries, often thanking the weather. It highlights this connection to the land, maybe, and just appreciating tangible results, quiet satisfaction.
And this was curious. An observation about car dealerships. Some users were saying service actually got better after COVID. Dealerships seeming less pushy about unnecessary repairs, being more transparent, even throwing in free brake checks or wipers. A small, unexpected positive note.
We even saw a lighthearted debate. Do conservatives really hate their food touching on the plate? Some people actually confirm they use section plates or separate plates for everything. It's kind of funny, a bit self-aware. Shows the community can talk about trivial, relatable stuff too.
So today, we've really taken a dive into this unique snapshot of conservative discussion online. We saw how one judicial nomination, Bove's, becomes this kind of lightning rod for much bigger debates, judicial philosophy, executive power, how people engage politically in America today.
Yeah, we've sort of peeled back the layers a bit, seen the internal tensions within conservative thought, the really passionate defense of certain principles, and also those everyday concerns that just weave through it all. You've heard how these conversations are shaping views on loyalty, the government's role, and the country's direction.
And given those deep divisions, those internal tensions we saw, especially around interpreting the Constitution, executive authority, political loyalty, how might all that actually shape the future of governing and legal thinking in the U.S.?
Right. What does it really mean for the balance of power when interpretations of core constitutional ideas diverge so much, even within the same broad ideological camp? And how do these big abstract debates connect with the day-to-day realities and those unexpected shared moments we talked about. Definitely something to mull over until our next deep dive.